Hi guys, Luton and Lvlcap here, and we're back with another episode of On the Level, and today we're going to be looking at the Aftermath DLC information. So far what we've been given on this is that it's going to have 4 new maps of urban warfare, and it says that we're going to be fighting through a lot of dust, rubble and earthquake damaged terrain. There's going to be new heavily modified military and civilian vehicles, and it's going to give you a real edge in terms of ingenuity and firepower. There's also going to be a new game mode, new assignments, achievements and dog tags. So with all that this has been given so far, what's your first thoughts on this level?
Initially, I'm pretty excited about it. Of course, I have my reservations because I wasn't the biggest fan in the world of close quarters, and this does seem like it's being geared towards infantry. But the whole premise of the post-earthquake terrain style maps could be very cool. I think Middle Eastern settings and maps, I haven't grown tired of them yet. I still think they're some of the more interesting and fun areas to have firefights. And so I have destroyed villages and cities from earthquakes with these fissures they talk about, opening up new paths and stuff to objectives. I think that could be a lot of fun. My main concern is that they talk a lot. Let's see what the line says. It says engage in vertical and horizontal urban combat. I know vertical combat was a big part of close quarters, and I think it became a little bit too chaotic with all the angles of exposure in there. I'm hoping that that's reduced a little because it seems like it's going to be more city warfare as opposed to being in just 1 or 2 building style warfare. So I'm hoping they can bring it back to some of the traditional battlefield map design, just in this new earthquake setting with infantry heavy combat.
Yeah, I think it's really important always to get a right balance, and I think it's interesting that they've gone from close quarters to armoured kill and then to this, and this feels like perhaps it's going to be a good balance between the two, and they're going to work hard to really push that, make sure that you get maybe the best from close quarters and the best from armoured kill. So maybe some fast action urban vehicle combat, maybe light armoured vehicles, and they're talking about sort of personnel carrying things, and it says here heavily modified troop transports, so perhaps we're thinking along the lines of Amtrak LAVs, but not so much the heavy tanks. So we'll see that kind of building to building combat, and maybe vehicles that can be taken down a little bit more easily and things like that from infantry on the ground, and people fighting in and out of buildings in amongst rubble. I like the description of dust and rubble. I hope they really push the dust element, and that we can get some nice smoke, some good particles, and if buildings are crashing down, get that coming in, perhaps almost like when you drop smoke grenades, but naturally, so we have kind of smoke sweeping around the area and things like that. Makes it a bit more tricky to pick targets out and people moving around. I love the idea of that. And we've also seen that, things like, for example, on Caspian border, when you have the big mast coming down. Now, there was obviously in the campaign the building earthquake coming down. I wonder whether they have anything like that coming in, where they have any actually animated buildings crushing, or perhaps you're actually in the middle of the map and the earthquake occurs when you're in the middle of the map. Be interesting to think about things like that.
Yeah, actually, you read my mind. I was thinking about that whole building coming down sequence, and yeah, they've got the tower in Caspian. Why couldn't they just implement that into one of the maps? And it would also be interesting to try and implement it earlier in the round. In Caspian, it seems to happen like with 10 to 20 tickets left in the round, so it doesn't really make a big difference. It's just sort of this awesome spectacle. But what if it happened, say, halfway through the round, all of a sudden this giant building comes down and divides the map in a different way? That's something to think about that I don't think too many multiplayer games have ever really attempted to do, is to change the layout of the map significantly, like as the round progresses. And that would be one really cool way to do it. Is you got this post-earthquake environment. Everybody knows there's tons of after quakes or tremors and stuff that come around. Like another little tremor would hit halfway through the round, and all of a sudden you've got a slightly modified map that you have to adapt to and deal with.
I mean, what about even the potential? Think about this. Maybe if you were playing Conquest or something like that, and the earthquake actually took out one of the objectives or something like that. I don't know whether they would actually put that in the game, but I like the idea of maybe in the last quarter of the game, when you get down to maybe 20-25% of your tickets, that one of the bases just gets taken down fully, and then it's literally all or nothing. You know, you've got to either cap those bases or you lose. I don't know. I doubt they would do that, but I like the idea of it literally changing the complete dynamic of the round sort of part way through or something like that.
Yeah, you might get guys complaining that earthquakes are overpowered, imbalanced.
That would be so good.
The Russians get a better earthquake than the US, you know.
Yeah, but I think as well, when we talk about urban combat, it's a danger of urban combat that you get people camping in buildings, camping on roofs and stuff like this, and they just never move. You know, they get in a good position on a roof and they never let go of it. The other problem is that, you know, if you think about some maps, think of like stuff like Karkand. Karkand is a great map, but it can be sometimes a little irritating to have to, you know, there's so many buildings with rooms inside, and when you're trying to find people, trying to clear through those rooms, it can be a little bit annoying. And I think it would be good if they could up the building destruction a little bit, so that if there was, I mean, thinking back to like Bad Company 2, where you could run C4 all the way around like 4 or 5 corners of a building, then just click it and bang, that building's gone. So if there's a sniper inside, you don't even have to bother searching, just C4 that building and he's gone. It would be good for them to up it a little bit in those kind of stakes, but again, I don't know whether they would.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's, since it's post earthquake, you know, it's hard to say how many buildings are actually going to be fully standing. But I imagine, like, you know, there'll be half destroyed buildings with tons of little nice cubby holes for snipers and bipoded LMG guys to camp in. I'm actually one who really likes those environments where there could be a guy in any window, because it really gives an advantage to somebody who wants to play, say, engineer, you know, and just take out the whole wall of the building and take out that sniper with it. So I like those environments and whatnot.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things as well is when you have a camping sniper or someone like that, you can just get up underneath, you know they're in there, and if you can pop a really accurate grenade just up through the window there and just get it in on them, and before you know, they're often focused on something else they don't even realise, and there's nothing more satisfying than getting that grenade explosion takes out the wall at the same time or something like that. That's always really good.
So what kind of military vehicles or civilian modified vehicles do you think they're going to have in this?
Of like motorbikes with machine guns strapped on the side.
Well, I believe motorbikes are being saved for endgame, which I think is funny that they keep touting that as their big endgame feature or something. Oh, motorcycles! I can't wait. But
did you ever see the Chuck Norris film Delta Force? Did you ever see that? It's a really cheesy film.
I think I have. Yeah,
they have that. They have like motorbikes with machine guns and little like rocket launchers on and everything. It's obviously hilarious. So I hope it's exactly like that. But no, we'll see. But in terms of vehicles for this one, I actually said, you know, they're talking about civilian vehicles and they're also talking about troop transports. Like I said, I think we'll see light armoured troop transports. When it comes to civilian vehicles, I think we'll see stuff like pickup trucks, like and you know, with machine guns mounted on the back. That's a pretty classic vehicle. But in terms of other things, I'm not sure really. That's the main one that I would think of. Just those kind of, because also that's not far out of the realms of what we have already in terms of Jeeps, you know, light vehicles, so it's quite obvious it would be a really easy transition for them to make there. I mean, I can't think what else they would have.
It seems like they'll probably mimic something that you see on like Grand Bazaar, where you've got an APC and a Jeep on each side, and it's not too much firepower, but it's enough to force some people to run engineer and take those guys out. I would expect them to be virtually identical, but just maybe look more like ragtag vehicles that you're able to assemble among after the aftermath, essentially.
Yeah.
And then go into combat. I kind of like the idea. Give it sort of a Mad Max feel to it, almost.
Yeah. Well, also, if you look at the concept art, the soldiers in it don't look clean cut. You know, their gear looks a bit torn up and stuff. I wonder whether they would bring any new kit in like that for guys. So you look, you know, you can choose for your character. He looks a little bit more torn up and stuff, like he's actually been all kind of in combat and he's all dusty. He's maybe had a bit of a hard time after the earthquake or something like that. That would be kind of cool to kind of bring it all in, keep the style in. But when we're talking about things falling down as well, like my idea was probably a bit unrealistic of destroying actually something that's not really going to happen. But I like the idea of, if you think back to the campaign as well, where exactly that building comes down. It's right at a main junction point. So when you think about stuff like Grand Bazaar, when you play that on a conquest, it's obviously those roads around can often be quite key. So I like the idea that on a map maybe you have like a main route or something, and that then gets closed off by a building coming down. So they then have to, their only other options are to flank around or whatever. So it wouldn't actually destroy an objective, but it would change the dynamic of the map completely, and people would have to focus their attentions in different areas and things. So I quite like the idea of that.
And so reading through the key features here too, it does say there's going to be a new game mode. So they could call it like Earthquake Conquest or something more clever than that. But that does suggest that there's going to be something in there. They could, of course, add the sort of search and destroy mode, which a lot of people have sort of been speculating will eventually come to Battlefield, where I don't know if I called it right, search and destroy, but the Counter-Strike mode where everybody has one life and it's more tactical. You go around because you value your one life quite a bit more. Yeah, could be interesting.
As I've said before, my main grievance with that is that people just don't play the objective. When people have the whole one life thing, generally what they tend to do, and when I used to play it with COD, which everyone knows, that's where, you know, the sort of people talk the most about search and destroy. Obviously Counter-Strike is a lot better, but the whole thing of having one life, people tend to focus purely on the kills. They just like, well, we'll wipe out the team because that's a hell of a lot more easy than arming the objective. But I don't know, it annoys me. If they brought that in with that setup, I probably wouldn't play it. But probably what I would do is get some friends together, a clan together, and say, okay, you only win if you plant the objective, and you're not allowed to run around crazy killing, you know. It is, if you actually play it right, it's a hell of a lot more enjoyable. But again, I think if they released that publicly, people wouldn't play it like that. They would literally just run around going for the kills, and I think that would be kind of depressing for me personally.
So it has been confirmed that there's going to be 4 new weapons, or not 4 new weapons. There's going to be 4 maps, but new weapons also in Aftermath. So I guess that'll be something nice. I can't imagine any guns that are more specifically designed to handle this kind of post-apocalyptic urban combat, but you know, new features, all that kind of stuff should be fun. Especially those dog tags. I cannot wait.
I think a lot of people love the dog tag set. It'd be cool to see some of those things come back for people to get. When it comes to weapons, again, be interested to see what they come with, and I wish they would up the skins and stuff like that, because I said to someone the other day, they were talking about this, they were like, oh, look at the MTAR, it's got a skin on the new one, and on the Armored Kill, and I was like, I said I didn't care that much about skins, and it's true, I'm not that fussed about skins, but it's a nice feature to have, and I really don't understand why they haven't, you know, they brought it in, and it's like, why not just do it for more guns, seriously, I mean, how long does it take?
Yeah, I'm still working on unlocking my latest 4-gun camos, which I'm convinced at this point that no DICE employee has actually unlocked them on their own, because you try getting 20 or 25 Claymore kills, it's a freaking nightmare.
Well,
I've been at it for weeks.
Well, especially as you say with how unreliable they are. I can't count the number of times where I run into a room and I hear a bang and I'm like, whoa, what was that? And I'm like, oh, it was a Claymore, but it didn't kill me, and then just carry on like normal, you know? I think another thing to think about as well is that with all these DLCs that have been coming out, we've had Close Quarters, then we're having Armored Kill, and then we're going into this one. And with each time, it's been quite different, you know. Close Quarters is obviously really close gunplay, then we're going into Armored Kill, it's going to be full out open warfare with vehicles, and then we're going into this one, Aftermath, and again it's kind of, we're not sure, but you know, a balance between the two, perhaps more light armoured combat, a bit of a mix of the two almost. I think it's kind of interesting to think about the fact that some people have mentioned that Battlefield 3 has never been really a finished game. They released it quite early, and there was a lot of things that needed updating throughout its progression and stuff. And some people have made the comment that, you know, Battlefield 3 perhaps was just a test run for Battlefield 4. So I think it's interesting to maybe make a little bit of a further link there, that these DLCs, they're quite different, each one that's been released. So perhaps they are kind of gauging opinion, looking at how successful they are, so that they can best place new maps and a whole new setup when it comes to Battlefield 4. So I think that's one to consider and give a little bit of thought. I mean, what's your opinion with that?
Yeah, actually, I never really looked at it that way before, but if you think about it, if DICE actually was using Battlefield 3 as a testbed, it would make a lot more sense. as to why some of the expansions have been so varied and diverse. You know, it's like a lot of people were thinking like, why not just have some vehicle maps and then some infantry maps and just have mixed expansions where everybody has something to be happy about rather than just doing armored kill all at once, where I know a lot of console people aren't quite as enthusiastic about that because the massive maps tend not to play as well on consoles because of the limited player count. But if you look at it from that perspective, the actual testbed perspective, it could be actually quite brilliant in terms of gauging what's going to be most popular, what's going to be most successful for Battlefield 4. Yeah. And from that perspective, I can almost get behind the developers and what they're doing. But at the same time, using a fully paid product as a test bed, you know, for people who are like you know, expecting a polished, refined product as opposed to being beta testers for Battlefield 4. I could see some people being upset. I don't mind all the diversity and stuff going on with the expansions. I think it's great. Battlefield's never really had this kind of direction before. It's always been like, okay, it's Battlefield 1942. It's World War II combat. There's going to be boats and tanks and all this stuff. And it's Battlefield Vietnam. It's going to be jungles and some Vietnamese cities, and it just didn't really evolve too much beyond the main themes. And Battlefield 3 has gotten quite diverse with all the maps and gameplay styles, and it's a lot of fun. They bring a lot to the table, but I imagine they probably will try and narrow it down for Battlefield 4.
Yeah, and I think it's a good thing that they've been diverse like this, because when you think about other titles that release things, often it can just be a literal case of maps and nothing much more than that. At least they've actually taken a bit of a chance here, and they've gone, okay, we're going to do close quarters, we're going to do armored kill, and then we're going to go into this aftermath, and so on and so on. So they have actually tried to add something to the game, rather than just taking what they already have and sticking things. I mean, they've brought new game modes in, they've brought new weapons in, they've done all these kind of things. Really is a lot more than other, you know, releases. I guess as well, when we're talking about gauging opinion, if you wanted to be a little bit cynical about it, you could look at them and say, okay, perhaps they're going to look at all the DLCs and see which one sells the best, which one sells the most, and then go, okay, people love this, we're gonna push that. But I think, you know, you can look at it everywhere. I mean, at the end of the day, everyone's a business, and you can look at things different ways. But it's an interesting thing to think about, and also I think whether or not that was actually their plan from the from day one, they're still going to do that. They're still going to look at it and say, well, this one wasn't very popular. I mean, you know, you learn from anything that you've done, haven't you? And you know, I agree. I don't think that perhaps it was their outright plan. You know, this is a title, and I'm sure that they've wanted this to be a complete title. I don't think they would be as silly as to sort of, you know, just make it like you're saying, a beta, an extended beta, and they just develop it as they go along. I don't think that's the case, but I do think that whenever you make any title or any product, it's an ongoing process of looking at that, analysing it, working out what works, what doesn't work, so that you can then take that on to the next stage and make the next one even more successful. I think that's just a natural thing to do, and I think that by doing these different things, these different DLCs, it just gives them a much better opportunity to sort of optimize all the best things, so that when Battlefield 4 comes out, it's going to be the best that it can be. So with that in mind, I'm really looking forward to Aftermath, and I'm really looking forward to everything that they can produce and move forward with.
I agree. Aftermath looks quite nice just from even these little concept arts here. I like everything that's been said about it so far, and I can't wait for it to come out.
Okay, so I think we've covered pretty much everything there is to when it comes to Aftermath. As always, we'd be really interested to hear all of your opinions and comments, so please comment in the video below. This has been Lutin and Lvlcap with On The Level. See you next time, guys, and this is Lutin signing off.